appropriate funding opportunity, great presentation and grantsmanship, good reviewers, next, a little bit of luck, and you celebrate the success of being funded. So in the next few slides, I'm going to deconvolute a little bit of that process and make it hopefully a little bit more clear for you. So for successful grant writing, we need to understand the review process, the funders, and the reviewers. And that's why what I'm going to focus on the next 15 minutes or so. In science, we write for the reviewers and for the funders. Successful writers understand what reviewers are used to reviewing, what they want to see, the criteria used to judge their reviews, the research approaches. They want to see clear and succinct descriptions of the project. And knowing and writing to this idea shows that you have discipline and shows good grantsmanship. Your task then is to turn the reviewer into your advocate. How do you do that? Well, you need to help the reviewers. You need to make their work as easy as possible. Your writing must be very clear and concise. You also need to convince the reviewer that your work is very important, that you know what you're doing, and that you can conduct and you can complete the proposed work. All of these concepts have to be in each and every one of the applications. Now, the first step is to identify the right grant opportunity for you, and that means what is right for you at the stage of your career that you're in. Okay, and today we're going to focus on NIH grants, but be aware that there are many other funding opportunities out there. For example, the NIH focuses on research through NHLBI and other institutes, but they also focus on training, and there are opportunities for training through the Fogarty International Center. Other foundations have different types of grants, such as the Boris Walker Fund, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Global Alliance for Chronic Disease. And then you also have organizations like the WHO and the American Heart Association that fund different types of grants. Next slide. So we need to consider three major elements when we are looking at funding opportunities. First is to know the goals, the objectives, the mission, and the purpose of the funding organization. For example, here I take from the NHLBI website, which is listed at the bottom of the slide, their strategic goals, which are rooted in a desire to understand and promote health and resilience, stimulate discoveries in the causes of disease, enable translation of discoveries from basic research to clinical practice, and foster training and mentoring of emerging scientists and physicians. In other words, if you deconvolute this statement, you'll see that there are opportunities for all of you to fit into one or more of those categories. So I strongly recommend, if you're planning on writing grants in the NHLBI strategic areas of interest, to go to this website and read their strategic goals. In addition, some of these funding institutes from time to time will publish special articles, and I strongly recommend those of you interested in cardiovascular disease to read this special article published in Circulation Research in 2019. They talk about 6 cross-cutting scientific focus areas to address cardiovascular sciences, not just in the US, but worldwide. First one is to address social determinants of cardiovascular health and health inequities. And Angela Brown will speak a little bit on that topic a little later today. Number 2, enhancing resilience. Number three, promoting cardiovascular health and preventing cardiovascular disease across the lifespan, the concept that Lisa talked about in her talk. Number four, eliminating hypertension-related cardiovascular disease, reducing the burden of heart failure, and finally, preventing vascular dementia. All of these elements are discussed in this publication, which I strongly recommend that you review. Next slide. Another document that you should also look at is this document. It's a PDF also from the NHLBI website talking about the strategic vision. And anybody writing an NHLBI grant should read this. This should be mandatory reading if you're writing an NHLBI proposal. Next slide. Another element to consider is to review and understand the goals and expectations of the grant program. Funders usually state clearly what they want to achieve through their grant program. For example, if you review this NIH request for application, RFA, or a KO1 proposal, you will see that they give you the funding opportunity title. For example, in this case, it's a Mentored Career Development Award to promote faculty diversity in biomedical research. And then they go and tell you what the purpose of this funding opportunity is. Applications to enhance the pool of highly trained investigators from diverse backgrounds, including those from groups underrepresented in research areas of interest to NHLBI. And then further down on the funding opportunity announcement, they give you specific words that are very important. And I underlined some of this here because when I would write a grant in response to this opportunity, I would include these keywords in the proposal to emphasize that A, I have read the announcement, and B, that I am addressing each one of these important areas. So the expectations for this one is intensive, mentored research, career development, experience expected to lead to independently funded research careers. All of these words are key, important, and should be included in your proposal when you write your grant. Your project goals and the funder goals should be aligned. If not, the chances of getting funded are going to be low. Next slide. The third element is to review, understand, and memorize the specific review criteria. Lisa talked about two types of grants, training grants and research grants. Training grants are usually focused on a candidate research career with the idea of developing an independent research program. On the other hand, research grants are focused on the significance and innovation of the research being done. Totally different focus. And the writing should be, again, to address what the funders are looking for. Next. So I urge you to review, understand, and memorize the grant criteria and the review process. This will provide clarity and allow for robust planning of your proposal. Next. Now, if you read the RFA and you still are not sure, you like clarity with what you should do or what the grant is asking, then here are some recommendations. Go to the grant website and see if they have any more information on what kind of things they're looking for. Or schedule a phone call with the funding agency. Attend an information session. Email the program officer. Or maybe even ask a colleague who has submitted to this grant opportunity before, so that you can have exactly a very clear idea of what they're looking for that will help you understand and to apply these elements that will set your proposal in a strong position to compete with equally strong proposals. Next slide. When you write Grants, as I said, you write for different types of reviewers. And here I will summarize the different kinds of reviewers that you will encounter. These are typical reviewers, but some of them meet one or more of these criteria. So I'm just giving you a general idea of what to expect and how to write for these people. So you'll have the expert reviewers. These people know the topic that you're writing as much as you do or more. So please do not misrepresent the topic, because this person will identify that you have made some mistakes in what you're proposing to do. You'll have sophisticated non-expert reviewers. They may not know as much as you on a specific topic, but they have general knowledge on many topics, and they know how to read and review grants. So logical thinking, and clear writing is really important with these reviewers. Next, a skilled scientist may know not much about your specific topic, but they do know how to follow logical thinking. And finally, technical experts. So biostatisticians or epidemiologists who knows how to do a power analysis or epidemiologic concept that should be written in very clear and specific wording. Know your reviewers because you are writing for them. Next. We'll talk a little bit now about some of the areas of the specific of the proposal. Lisa covered some of these, but I want to emphasize some of these concepts. Number one, the specific aims page is usually one page, and it is the most important section of the entire application. Why? Many reviewers will review the specific aims first, and then they will put your grant into one of three piles: good, bad, or maybe. You want the reviewers to put your proposal on the good pile from the get-go, and you do that by writing a very strong specific aims. It represents a short summary of your entire grant proposal. It should be the first and the last section you write. And as you're writing the rest of your grant, you're modifying this section constantly, over and over again, until you achieve perfection. Every single word in the specific aims is important. It's important also to write in simple, plain language. Specific aim serves as the roadmap to the entire application. It must be very well written and very well thought out. As such, you need to write, revise, write, revise until perfection is achieved. Next. Again, specific aims are most important section of the entire application. Write the specific aims with the reviewer in mind, so quickly gain their attention and their interest. Convince the reviewer that their bulk work is important, that you and your team are the best team to conduct the work, and that your application is both feasible and practical. Convince the funders that the application should be funded. Next. The general components of the specific aims, usually 4 paragraphs. First one has an introduction. This is where you state the problem or the gap. Paragraph number 2 is where you propose the solution. Number 3, the aims. And number 4, the summary and how your project fits into the big picture of the field. You will have another talk about specific aims. Actually, 2 talks are coming up. We'll go over some more details on that. Lisa already talked about the significance innovation investigators approach and environment. I'm not going to go over too many more details here, but next slide. I do want you to know how the grants are scored. And the NIH grants are scored on a score of 1 through 9, with lower scores being better, higher score being worse. And the first three scores, 1 to 3, suggest that your proposal has high impact. Scores 4 to 6, that the impact is modest, and scores of 7 to 9, that your impact is low. So keep this in mind as you write proposals. Obviously, you want your proposals to be scored in the 1 to 3 range as much as possible. Next slide. The overall impact score shows or suggests that the likelihood that the project will exert a powerful influence on the field and the NIH mission. And the next, reviewers consider all 5 core review scores criteria: significant investigator, innovation, approach, and environment. And with that, they come up with a score that summarizes the entire application. However, this impact score does not need to be strong in all criteria to get an outstanding overall score, although all criteria can affect the score. This overall impact score is not a mathematical sum of all the other scores. It's usually driven by significance and innovation in the case of research grants. It reflects a reviewer's assessment that the grant will have a sustained, powerful influence on the field and that will change common gaps or paradigms in the field. Next. And so here's an example of an R1 grant scores. Usually, typically, it's reviewed by 3 or more reviewers. Each one of them will give a score to each one of the 5 areas. And then at the end, the reviewer will give an overall impact score. And it's all those impact scores of all the reviewers in the review session that will then be related to the overall impact score given to the application. Next. Lisa also talked about, no, go back, about K grants, and these are K grants are training grants. Their criteria for review are slightly different from the investigator art grants. However, they are still reviewed by 3 reviewers with a focus now slightly different on the candidate, the career development plan, the research plan, mentors and mentoring team, and the environment. But still the scoring system is the same, 1 to 9, and an overall impact score is given to each application. Next. So here's where we are now on the summary of the grant writing. Here's a success, and this is what people see at the end. But what they don't see, next slide, is that this is a arduous process that requires, next, persistence, sometimes failure, a lot of sacrifice, some disappointment, a lot of dedication, hard work, and a lot of discipline. This is what you need to write successful grants. Next slide. So in summary, things to consider before you start: you need to identify the right funding agency that is appropriate for your level of training. The grant mechanism has to be, like I said, appropriate for the career stage and the project. Start early, 6 to 12 months before the grant deadline. You write for the reviewers. You need to write in simple language and with clarity. Avoid confusion. A confused reviewer is a bad reviewer, bad for you, meaning they will give you bad scores. Know your grant funding mechanism. Know how grants are scored. And remember that specific aim stage is the most important section of the grant. Next. Finally, I want to thank you for your attention, and I believe that we are we're out of time. So with that, I'm going to please hold your questions for the Q&A session coming up in about an hour. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next speaker. and it's writing specific aims, general guidelines, and it's Nabila Crystal. Nabila?
Thank you, Victor. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Fabulous. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I am Nabila. I'm based in Botswana working on the Intercare project. And I am going to talk very briefly about specific aim and the general guidelines to try and write something of a good standard. So these slides are not mine. They actually belong to one of my PIs, Dr. Laura Bogart, who is a senior behavioral scientist at the RAND Institute. And unfortunately, she had a last minute conflict and therefore she was not able to deliver her slides personally. So I will try and do my best on her behalf here. And Laura's profile is very interesting because she's almost a career funded, NIH funded researcher. So her input is greatly appreciated, especially because she has basically been there, done that, and got the funding for the best part of 22 years. In terms of the specific aims section of your grant application, you'll see a lot of numbers over the next few slides, and hopefully they will make sense once you actually log into the system where you go in and have a look at what the application looks like. And this is one of those here. So in terms of the specific aims instructions, it's very important to comply with the NIH guidelines, even down to the formatting. So they're very strict about having a one-page limit. They must be single-spaced with half-inch margin, and they even mandate the font that you must use when you are writing. So this is very important because if you start writing and you find out 3 months down the line that you have been using the wrong instructions, it's going to be very difficult to go back and make things fit properly. Your goals must be concise because obviously you don't have much space in order to make impact, as Victor was saying in some of his slides. And you need to list succinctly the specific objectives of the proposal that you are trying to develop here. Again, Victor has alluded to this, and Laura is repeating here that the specific aim section is the most important part of the application because essentially it's a summary of the entire project that you are presenting to the reviewers. So you should use the aims to gather the confidence and convince the reviewers that your work is important and that your team have the correct profile and correct experience, correct facilities, and be in general the best people to do this project. When you're writing this section, it should be essentially like a roadmap for the rest of your application. Again, in terms of the review criteria, there are 4 of them, as Victor had already gone into, so I'm going to go fairly quickly on this one, but 4 points that you need to address is the significance. What is the important problem that you are trying to address in your research proposal? What is the potential impact of the result from the project? And then the next section is innovation. What is new and exciting about this project? Why should they give you the money to try and do something different this time? Then you have your approach, which is what are you proposing to do? Essentially, how are you going to do this? And then again, investigator and environment and facilities. Why is it that your team is the right one to conduct this work successfully? It's a fine line in terms of the writing. It should be scientific enough so that you are able to relay your research question, but it should also be understandable by a general lay audience. It should be written plainly and clearly, so not too much jargon or too much abbreviations. You should use word and terms from the funding opportunity itself to show how you are very closely matching what the funders need with what your project can actually do. And you should try and provide a compelling argument for why this study is needed that is easily understandable, not to those in the field, but also to experts. So as I say, it's a fine line between being too lay and too technical, but essentially not all reviewers are going to be expert in the field that you are researching in, and you should be able to provide information that's understandable by a spectrum of people. Okay, so along the same line, tell an easy to follow story to convey where the research is, where it needs to be, and why it is the next logical step, and why you are the one to do it. Laura suggests that you write the specific aim story as an hourglass, where you have the wide part that represent the general information and the global significance, and then the narrow parts are more the fine details as your proposal itself. The aims can help to develop the advocacy among the reviewers for your proposal, and they need a simple story to convey to the study section in 5 minutes or less. So the study section is a meeting that reviewers are convened to, and essentially they have to basically just sell your research project to a panel. So this is what she means here by the study section, and so that's why she suggests that you grab your audience attention so that in the 5 minutes or less that they have, they can quickly understand what your project is about, what you're trying to do, and why they should give you the money. There is no one right way to organize a specific end section, and some decisions are stylistic. Victor had, again, those 4 points, those 4 different stages, and did advise to continue writing the specific aims again and again and again. And this is, again, what Laura advises here. But in terms of how to structure it, one common way, a 4-way split: introduction, paragraph, then your second paragraph will answer the questions: what your study is, why are you proposing your study, who is doing the study, and then you've got your next paragraph, which are the specific aims themselves, and then the last bit is essentially like a conclusion, a payoff paragraph, where you are trying to show what the impact of your project could be. Some detail here about the introduction paragraph. I think we've talked about grabbing people's interest and grabbing their attention, and immediately try to establish the proposal relevance and urgency. A statement on the current knowledge so that they know what is happening within your field. Like I say, some reviewers will be less expert, so you just need to bring them up to date. And introduce what's missing. Just be specific about the gaps in the knowledge that's happening at the moment, and convey a critical need as to why this project is the logical next step to make your field go forward. Some examples, which I won't go into here, but you will have them as part of the recording and as part of the slide deck. So again, you'll see how things are split in terms of the paragraphs. Then the second one is the what, why, who paragraph. Fairly straightforward. You just need to answer those questions. What do you want to do? Why are you doing it? How are you going to do it? You can begin with the long-term goals, where your project is going to lead. Then you follow with the objective of this particular grant application. What is this research seeking to accomplish? What is your central hypothesis? And link the objective back to the gap in knowledge, so that it's, as we said, it's kind of like a story and a roadmap of your project. So remember to always try and link things together. Then you end with your rationale for conducting this research and for your proposed hypothesis. Answering the question, what will become possible after the research is conducted that is not possible now? And you can also answer the who question with including your team qualification, work that they've done in the past. So that's your preliminary data, their field of expertise, whether they have worked together before, and write the grant numbers on the projects that they have completed together, just to kind of like build and demonstrate to the reviewers that those are people who work well together, who have published, who have done ABC, and therefore have the correct qualification and expertise for this. The specific aim paragraph itself, again, should be brief. Remember, you've only got the 1 page of A4. It should be informative headlines that will attract the reviewer's attention and that will logically follow as next steps. The aims should be obviously related, but they don't necessarily have to be dependent on each other. So they shouldn't be appearing as separate studies, and the failure of one aim doesn't have to negatively influence or prevent the completion of any subsequent aims that you will have listed there.
Hola chicos, buenos días.
There's no
Aparentemente el doctor
correct
Pablo
number of
pone
specific aims,
que
but
esta sería la doctora
anything
Mónica
between 2 and 4
pasando para la tarde,
aims are
pero
what
creo que no le
the
confirmó entonces
normal, what is
exactamente.
typical.
El doctor
Two
ahorita está
aims usually enough
en
for
transporte y
pilot
que tiene una
projects,
reunión
and
y
three to four
no
are
va a ser
usually
posible
acceptable for
verlos ahora.
larger projects
Luego ya
like
lo reprogramaré.
RCTs. And we have
A las 11 creo.
examples. Yeah, so here are again some examples that I won't go into here. You'll be able to
A las
access
11
this in your own
tenemos
time
con
as part
Claudia
of the
Machita de
recording
análisis
and
integrado de
slide deck,
datos.
but you can see that it's
Caballero.
written very briefly and labeled 1, 2, 3, so that we are exactly sure and we are able to then refer in the rest of
No, no he hablado con ella, dile que hable con
proposal
Pablo.
as aim 1, aim 2, or aim 3. Another example, I think someone was asking about the types of research that you can apply to for NIH funding. So this one is not a clinical trial, it's more like an implementation research. And you can also have behavioral research done as well. And then lastly, you have your payoff paragraph, which should reflect on those 3 points in bold here. So the first one is, what would completion of this project bring to the field that is not present currently? So again, you see a lot of repetition, a lot of linking in, because we had the same question just now under section 2. So you are constantly, reminding and linking your roadmap for your project. Then your expected outcomes. What are the payoffs that the reviewers can expect if the aims are met? So basically, where is the paradigm shift? What knowledge is this going to bring tangibly if you complete this study? And then a general impact. How will the outcomes advance your field, help those who need it, and contribute to the mission of the NIH Institute or center that you are applying for funding to? And again, there may be overlapping impacts, so that's not an issue. So specific aims can be tailored by project and personal writing styles. There is flexibility and some examples for different things here. Innovation and expected outcomes may be covered in other parts of the aims or woven throughout rather than only in the last paragraph. And again, the approach may be integrated into the aims paragraph before the specific aims are specified or right after the aims, or maybe you want to have them in all 3. Any methodological detail that might change should not be numbered aims as a headline. And also to say that not all research will be driven by a hypothesis, and we've already talked about some of the different studies that we can seek funding for. I hope this makes some sense. And then it's important to draft the specific aims section early in the process. Again, bouncing off what Vincent just presented, the 6 to 12 months. Yeah, definitely something that you should start as early as possible and continue to refine as you are completing the rest of your grant application as you are getting early feedback on your ideas, on your proposal from your colleagues, you can present aims to community advisory boards or Ministry of Health, and they can again have some buy-in and tell you how to refine things, or just provide some general feedback that's always useful, and make your research proposal overall more relevant and more competitive, hopefully. Some links to resources that were used to compile those slides, and also some others written directly by some NIH staff, like the one at the bottom here. Again, accessible from the resources after the completion of this workshop. I think that's everything I had. Thank you.
Nabila, thank you so much for a great presentation on how to write the specific aim section. Right on target, very informative. Thank you so much. We have about 2 minutes left before we go on a 20-minute break. And I want to ask if there are any questions at this time. I saw on the chat somebody said, I am a social scientist, are behavioral type of proposals acceptable? And the answer is yes. They are acceptable for the SRP, and also the NHLBI has supported work for social scientists on behavior activities. So definitely that's part of what is funded. Are there any other questions from anybody before we go on break? And while we wait for that, Manny, can you put up the slide where people can do the evaluation? I would like to ask everybody to start thinking about the course and what you have liked and what you don't like, and any suggestions for future activities or courses. Your feedback is very important to us. We take it very seriously, each and every